Hello family, we love having you here as always. Before we get started with this intriguing story, we would love for you to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you would get notified immediately we drop new stories. As we are dedicated to you, our family, we have pledged to keep bringing you new stories daily. Now enjoy.
Chinaza, once a humble fish seller by the roadside, lived a life wrapped in quiet struggle. Her days smelled of salt, smoke, and silver-scaled promise. She never sought wealth, only peace. Then came Chinadu, a man with simple clothes, soft eyes, and a secret hidden beneath his calm, the weight of riches most only dream of. He bought fish from her for 2 weeks. And on the 14th day, he offered her dinner. She laughed. The world didn't make room for stories like hers. But he insisted. He said he saw her heart, not her hands. And so, she let him in. What followed was a wedding draped in gold, music that touched the skies, and a promise made before hundreds, that love would carry them through it all. But the gates of Chinadu's family mansion did not open with warmth. His mother, known as Mama Chinadu, carried pride like a crown of thorns. His sister Ojeti spoke poison sweetly. To them, Chinaza was dirt and silk, a stain they refused to wash away. What began with words became actions. Missing belongings, spilled meals, laughter at her pain. She knocked on doors that were never opened. And when she cried, no one heard her. She told her husband. He chose peace over truth. He called it patience. She called it betrayal. And then the child came. A flicker of hope in a dark house. But even that was not safe. One evening, a shattered pot. Cruel remark. A slap that echoed through stone walls. And a second slap that stole the air from her lungs. Her body gave in. Her child was gone. The hands that should have lifted her up had pushed her down. And when the truth screamed through hidden recordings, Chinadu finally saw what he had ignored. But by then, a part of Chinaza had already been buried. Now, in a land far from home, surrounded by silence and foreign skies, she must decide if broken trust can ever be mended. And if a heart, once shattered, can still remember how to love. Chinaza now lived far from the land of her birth. In a place where the air smelled different, where the people spoke fast and smiled less. Her new home was quiet. Too quiet. The silence reminded her of all she had lost. She moved through the apartment like a shadow, her eyes often fixed on nothing, her heart carrying the weight of everything she had endured. The laughter she once had, the strength in her voice, the fire in her spirit, all now buried under memories too heavy to speak aloud. Chinadu tried. Each morning he made her breakfast. Each night he asked if she needed anything. He spoke softly, moved gently, and watched her from a distance like a man waiting to be called back into the warmth he once took for granted. But Chinaza did not trust ease. Not anymore. Kindness had once turned its back on her. Promises had once left her bleeding on the floor. Her body was healing, but her soul remained bruised. The pain of losing her child never left her. At times, she would place her hand on her stomach out of habit, only to be reminded of what had been taken. There were nights when she awoke in tears, hearing echoes of laughter that once mocked her, feeling the cold splash of rain as she stood locked outside the house she was supposed to call home. She didn't speak much. Words had failed her before. So now she sat with her silence, wore it like a cloak, and waited to see if healing would come. Chinadu watched her, guilt dragging at his chest. He knew he had chosen the comfort of lies over the truth in her eyes. He had seen too late the monster that grew in the house he came from. And now he wanted to fix what was broken, but he didn't know where to begin. One evening, he sat beside her without speaking. He didn't ask her to forgive him. He didn't try to explain. He just sat. And for the first time in a long while, Chinaza didn't move away. She still didn't smile. But she didn't flinch either. And in that quiet moment, something small shifted. Beginning. Or maybe just the first breath after drowning. In this new land, Chinaza moved like a woman learning to breathe again. The streets were wide, the skies open, but her spirit remained closed. The sounds of this foreign place were different. No market chatter, no distant drumbeat, no familiar call of her neighbors. Only the hum of machines and the hollow echo of traffic. Her mornings were slow. She would sit by the window wrapped in silence, watching people pass without purpose. The air felt colder not from weather but from absence. She no longer heard the clatter of fish baskets, the sharp call of buyers, or the laughter of nearby children. Only the stillness of a home too quiet for comfort. Each day, Chinadu moved carefully around her, like a man walking through a sacred shrine. He cooked her meals and left them without expectation. He swept the floors, folded her laundry, left fresh flowers on the table. He never raised his voice, never pressed her for words, never asked for more than her presence. But Chinaza's silence was not peace. It was a heavy stillness, like a storm that had passed but left the ground ruined. Even on the sunniest days, her heart remained clouded. She would walk through parks, letting her feet follow the wind, but her mind stayed in the past. Every tree reminded her of home. Every child's laugh reminded her of what she had lost. Sometimes she would sit on a bench and close her eyes, and in that moment, the air would smell like smoke and stew and red earth, and her body would remember the warmth of the life she once had. But always it would return. The image of the kitchen floor. The sound of her own cry. The sharpness of betrayal. At night, Chinaza would lie in bed, her hand resting on the emptiness where life once grew. She did not weep loudly. She had done that already. Now her grief lived quietly in sighs, in the way she turned her face from the morning light, in how she pressed her lips together when Chinadu entered the room. The pain did not leave, not even in this new place. It only changed its clothes, moved slower, spoke less. And still Chinadu tried. He placed candles on the table. He played soft music in the evenings. He looked at her with eyes filled with regret and hope, but never with pity. He waited. And Chinaza, though she said nothing, began to notice. It was not love. Not yet. But it was something. Seed, perhaps. Or the faint stirring of wind before the return of rain. One morning, the quiet stretched longer than usual. The house, though clean and warm, still held the weight of unspoken things. Chinadu, who had watched the days pass like drifting smoke, found courage in the stillness. He brought the idea carefully, like offering a gourd of water to someone too tired to speak. Therapy, he called it. A place to unburden. Place to heal. First, Chinaza said nothing. The word felt strange, distant. Where she came from, healing was done in prayer, in song, in silence, or in the wisdom of elders. To speak to a stranger about pain was not tradition. But this land was not home. And her suffering had rooted itself too deeply to be ignored. She did not agree with words. She agreed with her eyes. Tired, worn, but willing. A small nod, and the journey began. The room was soft, filled with light, yet Chinaza felt like a shadow sitting in it. The woman who waited for her, calm and patient, asked no questions at first. She only invited. And slowly, Chinaza began to speak. At first, her voice trembled. She spoke of the mansion, of the walls that listened but never protected, of footsteps that mocked, of laughter that cut deeper than knives, of a husband's silence, and a child that never saw the light of day. Then the words poured faster. The kitchen, pot, the slap, the floor, pain, the blood, the silence that followed, and the betrayal that came wrapped in denial. Her hands shook, her voice cracked, but she kept speaking. And in that moment, something inside her cracked open, not from pain but from release. She was no longer holding the weight alone. And as the session came to a close, Chinaza felt something she had not felt in many moons. Lightness, faint but real. She walked out into the air with her shoulders a little straighter, her breath a little deeper. And in her heart a voice rose, one she hadn't heard in a long time. For the first time she wasn't just a victim. She was a woman finding her voice again. Days passed like slow-moving clouds, each one carrying a little more light than the one before. Chinaza continued her journey through therapy, step by step, word by word. Yet even with healing beginning to take root, a part of her still felt alone. In this distant land, there were no familiar voices, no old songs, no faces that remembered who she was before the pain. Then came a call, unexpected yet familiar. A voice from the past, her childhood friend. Years had passed between them, but the bond had not died. With arms open and eyes full of concern, stepped back into her life like rain returning to dry earth. Her presence was like firewood in Harmattan, warming, reviving, steady. She listened without judgment, asked the questions no one else dared, and reminded Chinaza of the woman she used to be before shame wrapped around her spirit like chains. Brought laughter back into the room, even if only in small sparks. She spoke of dreams, of strength, of survival. And when she looked at Chinaza, it was not with pity but pride. But did not come only to comfort. She came with eyes sharp and a voice firm. When she met Chinadu, she did not bow her head or soften her words. She looked at him the way an elder watches a restless boy and asked no favors. Her warning was clear, though it did not need many words. She had heard the stories. She had seen what silence could cost. And she made it known that if Chinadu ever failed Chinaza again, there would be no peace between them. Chinadu listened not with defense but with humility. The presence of reminded him that his wife had not always been broken. She had been loved once by people who saw her light before he let it fade. And Chinaza, sitting between the past and the present, felt something rise in her, a quiet strength. With by her side, the shadows no longer felt as heavy. Her voice was growing. Her fire was returning. The pieces of herself that had scattered were beginning to gather again. In that moment, a new chapter whispered its beginning, one where sisterhood stood guard, and no wound would be suffered in silence again. The night sky stretched wide above them, full of stars that shimmered like the eyes of ancestors watching from afar. The air was quiet, yet filled with words unsaid. Chinaza sat beside Chinadu, her shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders, as though shielding herself not from the cold, but from the memories that still lingered like dust in her chest. The silence between them was not new. It had lived with them, slept beside them, and walked their halls since the day their child was lost. But now, beneath the gaze of the night, Chinaza allowed herself to speak. Her words were not loud. They did not rise like thunder. They came soft but sure, carrying the weight of truth. She had not stopped loving him. That thread had remained, even when everything else unraveled. But what had withered was belief, the knowing that his love had once held her safe, the trust that his heart would choose her above all others. She had loved him through silence. Loved him while his mother struck her with hands and words. Loved him when his sister mocked her pain. Loved him even when he turned away from her cries, and chose doubt over devotion. Chinadu listened, his hands folded, his head low. He did not argue. He did not defend. He received her words the way dry ground receives rain, knowing it had been too long and he had been too empty. Then he spoke, with the voice of a man no longer blind. He did not beg. He did not promise perfection. But he vowed that each day forward would be proof. That he would not seek to erase the past, but to mend what he had broken. That every action, every choice would be made with care, with patience, with the understanding that trust, once lost, must be earned like harvest from hardened soil. Chinaza did not smile. But she did not walk away either. And in the quiet that followed, the stars above them flickered with quiet approval. She was not healed. He was not redeemed. But they were no longer standing on opposite shores. And that night, beneath the watching sky, something shifted. Not a return to what once was, but the first fragile step toward what could be.